Hey, it's Anthony with On the Snap. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You are going out to shoot your match, maybe it's league, maybe it's a tournament, and your opponent comes up and you know this person. You've played them before, and your mind tells you, I could beat this person. I played them, I know their skill level, maybe they're lower ranked than I am if it's a handicap situation, or maybe you know their Fargo or what have you. You start to get comfortable, you start to relax a little bit, and that's where things start to go wrong. So we call this playing down. You're playing down to your opponent. We're going to take a look at a match here today, which at times is going to be a little hard to watch, I'm going to be honest. But we want to see what happens when you start to notice that you're playing down to your opponent. What do we do to get through that? What can we do to kind of reframe and find our stroke again and finish up that match? Let's take a look. Hey everybody, thanks for being here. As I said in my intro, this is going to be pretty interesting to watch. Cringy at times, definitely. And again, just as a note, this was on the same day as some of the previous Masters match videos. Autofocus is acting up a little bit. That will be fixed in the future, so thanks for your patience with that. But I think we all kind of recognize what's happening. We're all pool players, right? We sort of know where the balls are going and what they are. So in this case, again, it's lag to choose game or the break. And in this case, the choices were 8-ball for the game, and I took the break. I started to move over to a second ball break, trying to see if I can get that to work for myself today. And what we're going to see in these next couple of games is that it doesn't work that well. It's not working that well for me. So I have to come into this cluster. Everything's sort of pushed over to the right-hand side of the table. I do end up with an open shot on this 10-ball, and I came off my last match feeling better. Just finding my stroke, trying to let it out a little bit, trying to play with confidence. And if I'm going to either over or underplay things, I was trying to err on the side of overplaying. So we're going to see how that works out for me. I am playing against somebody in the Masters League who I really enjoy playing against, but I do notice that when I play against certain people, my awareness of their skill level can get the better of me, which is just a bad habit on my part, really. I need to be playing my game no matter who I'm playing. This comes back to that debate about, do you play against the player or the table, the situation on the table? Ages-old debate in billiards, and there's really valid arguments on either side, and most times that discussion, that argument, is settled with an agreement that it's both. you can play both in different situations. But in this case, I let the player and my awareness of his skill level kind of get the better of me in certain situations. So I led him back to the table. I missed an easy back cut on the 14 ball into the side pocket. I was worried too much about getting shape on this cluster down on the bottom of the table. Let him back on the table, and now he had an open line on a few shots to open up. In a bit of a tricky position here, it does seem like he's still got the 4-ball up top. And he's either lining up, he might be lining up for the 6 in the side here, which he was. And he had a line on that, which is nice. He's now got a back cut on the 3. It's hard to tell if the 4 goes or not. He might be able to nudge in that 4-ball. But his 1-ball's in trouble. You can see this cluster down here. His 1-ball's in that pack. So he'll have to figure out a solution for how to either break that out or get down below it and play a good safety. So here he tries to address the problems early, which is a great approach. He's going to take the 7-ball. The cue ball should dive into the rail, play right into the pack, which it does. Doesn't break up very favorably. It doesn't leave a shot on the 1-ball. The 1-ball will not pass. That's what I kind of peeked over. Look at the 1-ball will not pass the 9-ball up here into the corner. But he's got to look at the 1, and he can start to think about a safety play. And some players will think about just creating distance. Just send your opponent up table, because it's going to be hard to block them and completely prevent them from getting a shot. He decided to play thin off the 1. That might have, I could go back and ask him actually, I'd be curious about that one. That might have just been an attempt to preserve a cluster. So to send the one into this pack of balls and hopefully tie up one of mine. It didn't quite work out that way, and I'm lining up, does the 8-ball have an easy pocket? What's going to be my key ball? Where do I want to be to play the 9? Does the 9 go in the side? So I'm starting to shape up each of these shots, and it's a reasonably open table at this point. The 9 is a bit tricky. You either need to make sure that you get above or below it with a clean line on the corner pocket. These side pockets on valley tables can be inconsistent sometimes. So I play a nice firm stop shot there. Again, just trying to let my stroke out and find that confidence. Sometimes you just need to think about dropping down into the body and focus on the feel. Get down out of your head. Play a nice smooth follow stroke. This was an attempt to get down below the 9 to make that 9 playable. This is, again, an example of just address those problems early. I take another peek at it in the side. I don't usually like those because you're going to have to let up on your stroke a lot. And from that angle, the corner pocket is much larger than the side pocket would be. This is going to be an interesting one. Keep that shot in mind, that 9-ball that I ran up the rail. Admittedly, in this case, I might have spun it out a bit. I probably used a bit of low right-hand spin, which is unnecessary. I could have just made the ball without any spin. But keep that in mind because I'll just say that corner pocket is going to come into play later. I don't want to spoil anything, but we're going to take a look at something a little later that feels funky to me upon review of the video footage. So stay tuned. We'll check that out in a later rack. Meanwhile, I let my opponent back to the table. He has a line on the 3-ball on the side. The 4 and the 1 don't really dress up. He decides to just play a trick shot, which, coming off the 3 in the side, playing into the 1 and the 4, and the 1 ended up going. Turns out it did dress up, but you just had to hit it like a magician. Clean straight line on the 4-ball, unfortunately. He dogged that one and got punished for it. What's more, he scratched. So now I've got ball in hand, 3 stripes left on the table. Clean opening to the 8-ball. You just have to play a good pattern here. You just have to make sure that your pattern makes sense. We're chatting a little bit about just, things pool players like to complain about, table conditions and, the humidity today, or, oh, this railing's in the way. Isn't that annoying? Yeah, we love to complain. What can I say? So you just got to pick your pattern. It's kind of hard to mess this one up. I mean, you get natural shape from any of these to any of the others, unless you hit one of them really, really bad. And opening up on that one, I didn't hit it great. I wouldn't say I hit it bad, but I left myself reasonably straight in on the 13, and now I have to do some work to get back over to the 9. There were multiple other ways to play this better than I did. So you just got to rely on your draw stroke here, play that 13 straight into the corner, draw back over to the rail. It's pretty forgiving because if you underplay it, you're here. If you overplay it, you come into the rail and back out. And from any of those lines, you're still going to end up with a reasonable shot on the 9-ball. And shape on the 8 is pretty natural from there. So now I'm starting to suspect that there might be something going on with that corner pocket. So instead of floating forward to get perfectly straight in on the 8-ball, I decide to play with a nice, authoritative, confident stroke, punch in that 9-ball, and leave myself a little bit of a cut on the 8, but I'm comfortable here. 8 center pocket. Cue ball floats down. By this point, if you're enjoying things, I encourage you to subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. You all know how YouTube stuff works. But yeah, I love having people show up. I love talking about commentary, engaging with you all down in the comments has been a lot of fun for me as well. So I'm going to keep getting content here. I'm going to keep building up the channel, and yeah, hope to keep that discussion going and keep us all learning about pool and getting better together. Meanwhile, I have not learned about pool since my first game. I've continued to use that second ball break, and not only is it a dry break, but look at this unbelievable cluster over here on this side. You're going to need a serious breakout shot to spread that out, or surgical precision in picking it apart, because that's a mess. My opponent's got open lines on some balls. With a little help from the 6 ball, we're able to pocket the 2 down table. The 6 goes and joins the party, is now part of that cluster. And my opponent's left in a difficult position here where maybe there's a severe back cut on the 3 ball down in the corner. You might be able to send it down in this direction. And even if you miss, you're at least getting one of your balls out of that cluster. But prospects are not great from this location. And there's few options for safes. Looks like we're playing under the 3. That might have been an attempt at a safe, just to send me into the cluster and limit my options. And it's pretty successful here. I've got some thin back cuts. I might be able to play a safety, line up on maybe the 14, drive the cue ball into the rail, and leave it in the pack. Playing off the 11 here in the side pocket is risky because the side pocket's right there, and the table can drift, or you could scratch. You don't want to scratch here. You never want to scratch, right? 12 ball's too close to the cue ball to really just kind of strike down on that and make anything happen. I'm not sure it's even open to the side pocket. I think the 9 ball blocks it. So it's kind of just between the 14 and then a risky hit on the 12. What I start to line up is sliding off the 14 and leaving my opponent in here behind the 12. Somewhat buried, maybe still a line on the 3 ball. And we should just be able to float over. And I watched it, and it did not quite make contact with the rail, so I decided that was a bad hit and pushed the ball in hand over to my opponent. Underplayed it just by a fraction. So he's got some decisions to make here. How do we get a breakout? How do we start to pick this apart? Interesting thing that can come up sometimes in games is there's maybe a fear component in playing against certain people, where if I open this too much or if I miss a shot, what's going to happen? You start thinking about those what ifs. And when that starts to worm its way into your game, you're going to notice your confidence dropping from there. We're taking some of these open table shots first. We'll pick those off. Maybe the plan is to come back around for the 6 ball. Might have cut that wrong. Might have cut it over to the right side of the pocket, sending the cue ball up to the left. Maybe the intention was to drift back this way with draw to get a line on the 6. We still have a line on the 6. He's still going to be able to pocket the 6 ball here. But prospects for the 4, 1, and 7 don't look too great after that. Getting a breakout off the 6 from this position may not be possible. I think here he might be sizing up, playing the 6 off the 4, which would help to open up the 4. Not sure he's got enough room to do that. Hard to tell. Hard to tell if we were going to try to, if he was going to try to cut the 6, overcut the 6 into the 4 and play it down into the corner from there. He's got an edge on the 4 ball. He can't really see the 7. He could play under the 1 ball for a defense, but now he's sort of shooting himself into a corner because he's opening things up. That might have been a play at the 1 ball. That might have been a cross corner bank on the 4 ball. Not sure. But we open things up a little bit, and I come back to the table with lots of stripes, lots of choices. Let's see if we can clean up the side pocket a little bit first. So starting with the 12 into the side, I try to use that angle to address the problems early and break out the cluster and get a bit of a bad roll. I certainly could have played that better. The reason I didn't play that any firmer is because I was concerned about, you could rewind if you want, concerned about the angle the cue ball would take off the rail coming into the 8 ball. I didn't want to risk pushing the 8 ball towards or into that opposite corner pocket. And as a result, from underplaying it, I am stuck between the 14 and the 7. Let's see what we make of this. Looks like I got an edge on the 13, or I thought I did, and I ended up playing into the 14. It worked out for me. Came off that side of the 14 and it sent me down table. I don't remember if that was intentional or not. Based on just the monitors here, it looked like I was lining up on the 13. So my opponent now is looking at playing the 7 ball off the 11 into the side pocket, which should leave shape on the 4. And it does. That's nicely played. And now he's got a line on the 4 ball. Naturally takes you over to the 8. You don't have to do anything special here. It's just speed control to get at least to center table. Anywhere in that zone would be completely fine. You don't have to work hard to have this line up for you. Missed that cut. So pretty severely overcut it. Not sure if he let up on his stroke a little bit. He gives me a bit of a hand wave to acknowledge that he left me in a bad spot. And I've got some playable shots from here, but they happen to be long and straight in. So for example, I could play the 15 here. I could play the 9 here. I could try to cut the 11 ball, which certainly goes up into the corner. But at this point, I'm not liking my chances too much of these long straight in shots because I'm starting to lose momentum a little bit. So I have to do something to find my rhythm. I opt for the 13 in the side, which is a bit of a two-way shot. So I play that knowing that if I miss, I'm going to be on the back side of the 4 ball. It's not going to leave him a playable cut. That works out nicely. If I had made the 13, I'm still going to end up with shape somewhere in this area, likely for the 9 ball in the side or the 14 in the corner up here. So I have to start to adapt my play style. And this is one of the strategies that I use to work on playing down to an opponent. Sometimes your natural, if it's an aggressive style or a defensive style, if you notice that you're starting to play down, you may have to adjust your style over to a different one. And so for me, that starts to look like playing a bit more defense than I normally would, not going for as many just brutal runouts, having to play a bit more defense to slow things down and control the game more, make it work in my favor a bit more. So that was the idea with that 13 two-way shot. Now I can start to hammer them a little bit and let my stroke out. I play a nice snip draw there on the 15. Gives me some options. I was wondering if I might be able to shape the 11 off that 15. Not comfortable with the cut here, so I'm going to look at one of the other stripes on the far side of the table. You could certainly play the 9 ball on the side and come around 2 or 3 rails for the 13 or the 14. You could play the 13 straight in and leave yourself a nice natural shot on the 14, pretty much straight in on the 14. Queuing's a bit awkward. Looks like we're over the 8, no matter how we play that 13. But it's a nice, easy stop shot. Hit that with confidence, and it leaves you a good slight back cut on the 14 to get down below it. Choosing my position zone here. I want a window that offers me the 9 or the 11. I would love to get down below the 11 to take care of that problem. And it's starting to look like the lower stripe there. Not sure if that's the 10 or the 12, but that one's going to end up being the key ball to get me on the 8. And I popped that stun shot off the 14 with a bit too much draw. I didn't allow the cue ball to drift in towards the 8 and the 11 as much as I needed to. So now I leave myself a somewhat thin cut on the 9 ball in the side. You can control that to get all over the table. I don't like this cut on the 11, but at this point, I'm no longer thinking about playing defense. I still have enough options for offense to make this playable. I opt for the 9 ball in the corner. And yeah, so instead of taking the cut, which maybe at the table looked different, from the monitor it looked fine, but maybe at the table it looked a little different. I bring myself back down table here, and this should be a reasonably straightforward spin. That's what I'm looking at, is the angle. The cue ball comes off the rail, and it naturally wants to go towards the 11. You can enhance this a little bit with high right, or just a high ball here, and you let the cue ball do the work to kind of float over. Or you can dramatically overplay it like that for no good reason. And you can see it in my body language, just a weird just a weird decision that should naturally just roll in under the 11. Then you have a pretty straightforward 11-8. Now I have to look at trying to cut the 11 in the side, and as I mentioned, the valley tables don't always accept that. Or do we need to try to play some kind of safe shot here? And safety's become increasingly difficult as the number of balls on the table dwindles. I'm looking at the left side of the 11 ball. Tried the cut. Ended up trying for the cut. And as you can see, I played it right into the jaw. If you hit the upper jaw, it never goes. If you hit the lower jaw, there is a chance for it to go. Now, in this case, it might have required a bit of spin, imparting a bit of spin from the cue ball over to the object ball to help the object ball spin into the pocket. It's touchy, especially at a low speed like that. So it was tough. Maybe the better play there would have been to try to play even just a basic defense, put some distance between my opponent and the 4 ball. But in this case, he makes a good shot to get on the 8 ball. 8 ball goes in, and my opponent takes his first game. And that's the difference between 2-1 and 3-0. So my opponent breaking, he opts for the second ball break, just as I was, but it works out a little better for my opponent than it was for me. A bit better of a spread. But again, this upper end of the table, there's nothing going on up there. Everything stayed in the lower end of the table. And a dry break as well, so it lets me come up and I've got choice. In racks like this where there are clusters, sometimes you have to take advantage of those larger pockets, slide in off of something. That allowed me to control the cue ball a little bit better, get a better line on the 2, so that when I play the 2, I can float up for the 5 or the 1. Looked like a spin shot, so kind of spinning in the 2, bit of running English, left-hand English. Allow the cue ball to open up and continue that path over to get on the 5. Right now I'm looking at the 4. You could certainly play the 4 in this corner, but the zone for it, the position zone for it, is mostly blocked. So my thought was if I can get below the 4 and play it in the side pocket, that would clear that out. And the 7 and the 3 should be pretty reasonable from there. And off the 5, I can play to try to get on the 4 now, because it's complicated. Take care of problems early. I'd have, overplayed that one a little bit. We had the 1 and the 7 as backups, and realistically, the 3 is also a backup. The 3 is a playable shot from here. You have to decide if you feel comfortable with this shot on the 4, cut it into the side. You got to think about your position, though. You don't want to send yourself back down table and leave no line. It ended up a little straighter than it seemed. I think the screen was a bit deceiving there. I got a little better on the 4 than I thought. So we were able to play that out to the long rail and back over, and that worked out fine. And here what I'm looking at is key ball might be the 3, and that's my line off that rail. If I end up playing a shot on the 3, cue ball comes over, and your line on the 8 ball from up table can look like that. So we play the 7 into the side, shaped on the 1, and the idea with the leave on the 1 ball is that we're supposed to get in a favorable position on the 3 to take us over to the 8. I did overplay that 7 ball a little bit. I left myself a bit of a funny back cut on the 1 ball, which is unnecessary. Anything like a stop shot or a bit of a drag follow on the 7 would have been fine. And then instead of hitting a good shot on the 1, I had a miscue. And that was just a bad stroke. It had nothing to do with tip placement or chalk or anything like that. Just stroked it poorly. I think my fundamentals slipped a little bit there. I think I needed to stand back up and reassess. Just didn't feel comfortable on the 1 ball. Sometimes you end up talking yourself out of it if you're not happy with the position you get, you sort of convince yourself to miss the shot. Weird sort of karmic retribution there. My opponent had a reasonably open table, but now we've got the 12 ball pushed back down into a cluster. I'm just grabbing the bridge for reach. We have to think about where we are going to be able to play into that cluster. Just a bit of a snip draw there to pull back a bit. He's still got a line on the 14, and the 14 sends the cue ball into the long rail and back over into the cluster. You could certainly play that shot to open up the cluster here. Interestingly, he opts for playing the 12 ball while bridging over the 13, which is hard to control, but he plays a good shot. Maybe drew back a bit more than he wanted to. Now we've got cut on the 10. And coming out a bit more would have been ideal to get on that 14. And now we're hooked. Still have a line on the 12 and the 13 in the cluster. Don't really want to open those up too much because they're blocking the 1 ball. So a lot of players would start to think about how to maintain that cluster and play defense at the same time. I would probably consider coming off the right-hand side of the 13, send the 13 this way, not into the cluster, so that the cue ball comes in under the 14 or close to the 14. He took the cut on the 12, which, as it turns out, went and played a good shot. 12 goes in the corner. Now we've got a pretty difficult shot. We're bridging off the rail. That's never comfortable. And long, sort of straight in, almost straight in shot on the 13 up here in the corner. And dogs it by a fair margin there. He's pretty upset about that one. He had an open line for the end of that game. And leaves me reasonable shape on a 3 ball out here. So playing 3 into the side, you float down for the 1, and you can come around 1 or 2 rails back above the 8 ball. And this is another one where you don't want to overcomplicate this. You don't want to overthink this. Trust your lines, pick your spot. And you're better off slightly overplaying it than underplaying it. They're spinning out up and over. That's fine. You flirt with the side pocket a little bit. I think some players might decide to play that with outside and bring the cue ball back this way. I think either is very playable. It's just preference. And you just bear down, pocket that 8 ball, and we take another one. So that makes it 3-1. So 4 total games. We only get 5 games of 8 ball. So this is our final game of 8 ball. I end up making a ball. Break works out a little better. You can see I changed it up. The ball that I made was just a wild ball. It was nothing straight in off the break. And my opponent and I were going back and forth chatting about just how the break was working out throughout this match. Bit of a complicated layout. I have to take solids here. And you could certainly open with the combo. I opt for the 7 ball to try to clean out this side of the table, this upper end of the table, and work my way down. Good clean cut on the 7, and we used the full pocket here, cheated it over to the right-hand side of the pocket. I was hoping for a better line on the 6 coming off of that. I knew that the combo, the 3-5 combo down here, would be a backup for me, but I do really want to address this issue down here. So had a good angle on that 4 ball. That was an attempt to break out the 1. I think in order to hit that, I played it a little too firm. You have to ease up on that a little bit. Maybe some left hand spin to send the cue ball down table into the cluster. But the angle was pretty tough. 6 ball's playable from here. We still have to figure out a way to address the 1 ball. And there's not a line off the 6 to get back down for the 1. So the pattern's going to have to change here. So play the 6. Simple stop shot. Safe and reliable there. Now the thinking is, when I play the combo, yep, I'm looking at how does the 3 come off this cluster. It's hard to judge because the 8-ball can come into play on this combo. But the thinking was, if the 3 comes off this lower rail, it might get into a position where it's playable and could offer a breakout on the 1-ball as well. Kind of judging that again. Looking at where the 3-ball will go off the cut. Played the combo, but I played the cut wrong. So ideally, the 5 would go into this side of the pocket, which sends the 3 off to this side. And I ended up doing the opposite, just accidentally, where the 5-ball went into the right-hand side of the pocket, which sent the 3 over to the left. Now the 3's tied up on the 8. I don't really want to move the 1 because it's also complicating his run out. So I decide to remove the 3 from the 8, leave it in a better position to potentially get a breakout later for myself, and also leave him some distance on his shots. So he's got to decide now, does he want to try to play offense? He's got a reasonable cut on the 15 in the side here, which almost goes. But then we push in the 13. He came with some, we were joking about it. He came with some unintentional pocketing of balls throughout the match, and we were joking about, oh, trick shots, and that's against the rules. Simple stop shot on the 11 ball gives you shape on the 15. We can get down below the 10 and the 9, start to clear out that side of the table. The 14 does go, which is good for him because if you get onto this side of the table, you play the 14 from here. That works out fine. From here, the cut's a little dicier, but will still go. And it might look like a split, but splits go to the shooter. Not sure if he really wanted the shape on the 10 down here. It works out fine, but for me, I'd rather be lower on the 10 ball to play it in the side. He's got a little bit of a cut on the side pocket. But if he makes this, he should be able to get a line on the 14. Which he does. And he gets over to the proper side of the 14. So this is working out. Cleaned out that top half of the table. And I do not remember if the 12 goes clean or not. It's blocked by the 1. Came in at the 12. And it did go, but he ended up overcutting it. And sometimes we trick ourselves that way, right? We know that it's pretty thin. We know we've got a line on the pocket. We end up overdoing it slightly. It happens. And from here, I've not only got a shot on the 3, but I have a pretty natural line from the 3 into this cluster. So you can come into the top half of it, or you can dig into the rail a little bit more and get underneath. There's not a huge risk of scratching here, so what I'm trying to determine is where do I want to contact the 1 to push the 1 into a position where I'll have a shot next. And the outside of that 1 ball should be fine in order to push the 1 up table. Cut ahead a little bit here. I think I had somebody walk across the table or something. And I came in too deep and missed the 1 and went into the stripes. So separated the stripes. The 1 has a bit of the pocket, maybe less than half the pocket in this case. You could theoretically play the 1 rail first, and it would go in off the 12. Trying to play it clean is risky. because if you miss that cut, it's going to come into too much of the 12 and either make it or block the pocket. So this is a touchy situation. So I reassessed there because somebody walked in front of the shot. That doesn't always throw me off, but if I do notice it, pulls me out of the routine. I'll pull back. So missed the cut. Just played it too far on the left side of the 1 ball. Caught too much of the 12. We got pretty fortunate with a roll here. It didn't leave my opponent an easy out. He does have a thin back cut on the 12 in the side, and the shape is not terrible off the 12. If you manage to make that cut, it can naturally come around for the 14. But it's touchy because you're not able to really sight the pocket. This is one of those blind shots that we talk about where you can't see the pocket in your peripherals while shooting. Yeah, so he's kind of sizing it up, and it's not a comfortable position to be in here. Some players might think about defense if you had a way to get me up here on this side of the table, not leaving me any kind of reasonable cut on the 1, and it just becomes more of a safety battle. So you might try to go off the left side of the 12 into it and around. Could work. Does seem like he's trying for either the back cut or the cross side. Tried the back cut and missed it by just a fraction, honestly. It went into the point and got really unlucky with the scratch there. So I've got ball in hand, 1 to the 8, really routine. You can play this to go short side on the 8 and cut it up in the corner. That's completely fine. Or you can come into the rail and get up above the 8. That's natural too. You can play it from under the 1 and drift up above the 8. Preference there. In this case, I decide to go under the 8 just to minimize cue ball travel and try to get as straight of a line on the 8 as I can. And I played it okay. Pretty good, pretty much straight in here. And take a look at this one. I call it up in the corner. This is just a low ball, just a stop shot. No spin. To me, I don't think I cut that wrong. I don't think I cut it into the rail. Take a look at the replay in slow-mo. Something happens. You might have to rewatch this one again. Something happens on that shot to throw it off. And I have reviewed the footage. I've looked back on it a number of times now. And my running theory is that the points on the side pocket are misaligned to the point where one of them is sticking out just slightly. In this case, it's the upper jaw or knuckle of the pocket is sticking out just slightly, such that when I cut that or shot that 8 ball up the rail, it nudged that point and pushed it off just the slightest amount. That's what it looks like to me. Because the action of the 8 ball, as soon as it starts to move, seems fluid and without spin and should have gone. So it was wild. Threw me off because I felt like I hit it good, and then I stood there sort of in disbelief. My opponent had a pretty tricky position there. 2 difficult shots. Cut on the 14 wasn't really playable. He went for a cross-side bank. Now I've got a reasonable cut on the 8 ball into the corner pocket. I cut it well into the center of the pocket, and I let the cue ball drift over into the opposite side pocket. And you can see now, I'm not usually big on showing a ton of emotion at the table, but I am shaking my head and letting my cue clatter down onto the table. It's starting to look like something. My opponent was getting ready to walk over to the table to rack the balls again, and he saw the cue ball drifting over to the side pocket, and he said, "Oh no, don't do that." It's kind of like rooting for me in a way. You hate to see it, right? Even if you're playing against someone, like you don't want somebody to lose that way. So move on to 9-ball. We're skipping ahead in the match a little bit. We're now 3-2. He breaks dry and leaves me in that position. I decide to play a rather aggressive bank shot. It had a clean line, but sometimes the position of balls like a 6 and a 5 in this case can be distracting. I put myself down here on the 2, and I think the hope was to end up above the 2, but I couldn't hold the cue ball enough. And here we just opt for a pretty simple safety. You can stop the cue ball. Freezing the opponent on the 9 is ideal there, but if you're doing too much work to control cue ball and object ball, sometimes both go wrong. Better to just pick one. So in this case, I'm stripping things down. This is how we got to play through sometimes. Strip it down, get back to basics, do things that are consistent for you, repeatable for you, build up your confidence that way. To me, that is a really solid strategy, and that helps me find that confidence again and build up my stroke again. So I played a simple safety there instead of worrying about freezing him up on the 9 or what have you. Just bank the 2 ball over to the other side of the table and don't leave a clean kick at it. That being said, it's not a super complicated one-rail kick, and with a little fling of the leg, he gets a good hit on the 2, shaves it on the way down, and makes contact with a rail afterwards. I think we were joking about like you can't kick without your legs or something. I don't know, something silly. And in this case, I opt for another simple safety. The intention was to roll behind the 8, which is fairly straightforward, but in this case, I played the 2 ball just a bit too thin, and I did not send the cue ball low enough down table to get below the 8. That being said, we're still not in a terrible position, although he has a line on the 2. There's not a ton you can do with it. There aren't many players who would walk up and try to fire this in down rail. He opts for the safety as well, and again, the intention was to get frozen behind the 8. There's plenty of room back there. He also underplayed it, which leaves a long cut on the 2 ball. Sends the cue ball off in this direction, and what I'm looking at is, can I get the breakout on the 3? The little hand flip, the universal sign for frustration in pool, shows that there is not an easy way to get over to the 3 ball from here. So I just decided to get big on this 2 ball and cheat it as much as I can. And you can see, if you go back and look at that again, I cheated it to the far extreme left-hand side of the pocket to get as much of the cue ball out, as much out of the cue ball as I could. And unfortunately, in this case, the 6 ball got in the way. I was not able to get the line on the 3 to break it out. Jump ahead a little bit here. There were a few things I was looking at. In the end, I opt for a reverse bank, cross-side bank on the 3. And looking at it now, it seemed like it was a double kiss, where the cue ball was not able to get out of the way fast enough to allow the 3 ball to pass. And I got a roll. So I left a 3 on the other side of the 8. My opponent could go 1 rail out and back like this, which was close. It was very, very close, but not good contact on the 3. I'm not sure from this angle, it's hard to tell, if my opponent could have gone behind the 8. It might have been too thin, where we didn't have an easy way to hit the 3 ball. Now in this position, although the 3 ball is makeable, how do you get on the 4? The 4 is up here and it's blocked behind the 5. There are a couple ways to play this. You could put the cue ball here, play into the rail on the 3, and try to bring the cue ball back this way. You could go under the 3 like I'm aiming right now. Then you end up back cutting the 3, and you have to use draw to pull the cue ball either straight into the cluster or into the rail and into the cluster, or overdraw it into the long rail and into the cluster. Any of those can work out, but you have to commit to a plan. You have to decide and visualize how you want to break out this cluster. Because without doing so, you're just making the 3 ball for no reason. You don't get any payoff from that. And in this case, I focused too much on how I wanted to hit the cluster and lapsed on making the ball. I didn't miss it by much, but on a valley table, if you're missing a ball, you must have hit it really bad, or you're, distracted with your position or thinking about something else too much. These are big pockets. So missing a ball in hand shot never feels good. That one's going to throw me off a little bit. And as much as you can celebrate, hey, I got my shape, or I got my position, or I got my breakout, doesn't matter if you don't make the ball. right? So not much to celebrate there. Cut ahead a little bit in this case because my opponent had to get out the bridge, and it's a weird position to have to use the bridge. So we just need to get a hit on the 3 ball. There's a chance to make this here. That's unfortunately the queuing was awkward, but you can definitely kick into that 3 ball with the intent to make it. So does not get a good hit, but clusters up the 3 ball a little bit such that it does not go in the corner. So I immediately opt for another safety, and the plan is to move the 3 up into a position where I'll be able to play the 4 easily afterwards. And that works out perfectly. Hooks behind the 7. No easy kick around this side of the 7 ball, so you're going to have to look long rail. Two rail might be on up here, but hard to judge coming between the 5 and the 4. This is a long kick with the bridge. It's hard to do. With a little help from the long rail, it's good contact and made the ball. Great shot. And here comes shot number 3. Keep the bridge in your hand. Luckily, he's got one of those fancy bridges that has every configuration imaginable. You could play this thin, come in on the short side of the 5, or a little thicker on the 4 and roll around the back side of the 5. I like this better. Gives you more options. You can't always trust a slow roll on these tables. It plays into the 5 there on the other side of the 6. Maybe more angle than he wanted. If you end up straighter on the 6 or even a back cut on the 6, then it's a natural follow shot to get shape on the 7 and shape on the 8 from there. So a bit more angle than he wanted. He's going to have to go down table and bounce back up. But the 8 ball can get in your way. So unfortunately, that 8 ball's right on that tangent line, and a little bit of a double kiss on the 8 ball kills all the energy from the cue ball. Now we're stuck down table. Aggressive play would be to go cross side. Conservative defensive play would be to play the 7 and leave your opponent behind the 9 ball. Goes aggressive, gets punished for it. That's tough. So I've got a 3 ball out here. Got to get good shape on the 8. The 8's pretty much in the exact center of the table. I don't really want to come down here and bring the 9 ball into play. So what I'm looking at is coming off the backside of the 7 and down. You want to come in a little higher, ideally, so that the corner pocket doesn't come into play. Like this. Thankfully, it doesn't actually come into play. And again, he and I are just going back and forth because he's seen me play a few times and he knows this is not my finest work. So I'm all but completely straight in on the 8 ball. 8 ball is not frozen to the rail, but very close. So you don't want to try to get too much out of the 8. You don't want to try to get too much cue ball movement off of that and risk missing it. I opt for a simple follow shot. Certainly could have come a little bit closer to get a straight line on the 9 ball. And here, I know that corner pocket's acting up a little bit. I know it's been a little funky. So as soon as I start to shape up on that and aim it, I know that I need to be a little more assertive, get a nice clean line, and if necessary, use the long rail. It will slide in off that long rail and improve your chances of making it. And that works out perfectly fine. I ended up using the long rail, and even at 1 diamond away, it still slides in. So I get up a game of 9 ball. We're now 4-2. And as a reminder, the Masters League is a race to 7 games between 8 ball and 9 ball. So this is a push-out shot in Masters. And typically, you don't want to push to a position that offers an offensive option. In this case, the one ball does not go because it's blocked by the 6, so it is a defense push. And then your opponent has to choose, do they want to play it from here or give it back to you? He decides to play it. Let's see what his plan is. Make something happen, and it works out. Fire at the one ball, and the 5 goes cross corner. We end up with a line on the 1, it would appear, and the cut on the 1 sends you down into this rail and towards the 2-9. Could shape the 2, but you have to get between the 8 and the... Yep, he played into the 2, which works out really well. And that depends on how you make the 1, which side of the pocket you play the 1 into, how you cheat that pocket. Autofocus is bugging out a little bit. But we have a situation here where my opponent's got to back cut the 2. That sends the cue ball down table. So he's got to do something to get good shape on the 3. And I think he tried to hold it too much. Didn't like... Probably the way to play that is to back cut the 2, let the stroke out so that the cue ball can come out and around the 3. You could also play that with draw into the 2, and it will kind of curve into that short rail back up above the 3. He tried to cheat the pocket a little bit and to hold it with his slower speed and missed the ball. So we've got a cut on the 2 on the side, and as long as we end up above the 3, we should be fine. Opt for the corner, which is a bit larger of a pocket there and ensures better shape, so that works out. Now we've got a natural line from the 3 to the 4. Coming out to the opposite long rail works out fine because then the shot's a bit straighter in. You don't have to worry about being here, cutting the 4 ball in and sending the cue ball around, which would work. But it depends on your comfort. Are you liking the longer, straighter shots, or are you liking the cut shots? You have to play to your comfort, especially when you notice that your opponent's game is throwing you off for whatever reason. So draw shot over to that far side of the rail. You could certainly play, instead of draw, you could play off the 6 in that same way and come back around the 8 ball. This works out fine. We're behind the 8. We have an easy cut on the 8 into the side pocket, and that floats down naturally for the 9 ball in the corner. Waiting for somebody to walk by, and my opponent decides to give me up that 9 ball. So a dry break here, giving my opponent some options. So he can decide to cut this 1 into the corner and then get down below the 2. It is a bit touchy. And the scorecard might not be accurate here. I was supposed to have added a game of 9 ball there. Makes a good shot on the 1 and gets a breakout. 3's hanging over a pocket. In this case, you just have to make sure to pocket the 2 ball, and shape should open up on the 3. I think he tried to hold it too much for the 3 ball. Ended up missing the 2. So pretty open layout here. No real problems to speak of. We just have to make sure that we pocket this 2. It's a thin back cut. The side pocket does come into play here. So I initially consider banking the 2 back into the 3. You have to decide if you like the cut better to avoid the side pocket, or if you want to play the bank back in the corner pocket into the 3. And I tried for that because it felt safer. Played out as a bit of a two-way, hiding the 2-ball down there. Autofocus starts to misbehave here for no discernible reason. But we should still be able to make out what's happening. He plays a soft touchdown, good contact on the 2, and pushes the 2 back up table. Nearly makes the 3. That would not have worked out too well for him. He would have hidden the 2 and had to continue to shoot. I do still have a line on the 2-ball here. And the 2 goes in the side. And I played that over into the side with authority. Followed out. I felt like my chances of shaping the 3 were pretty good, but there is a wall of balls there, and it eliminates a lot of options. So I immediately go to grab my jump cue. This is a pretty straightforward jump. You could send the cue ball off the table if you come into contact with the 3 too close to this rail. You have to be mindful of that. But as long as you get clearance on that 5-ball, the 3 should go. Won't have to worry too much about shape on the 4 either. And unfortunately here, although I was blocking it, I made contact with the 5 as I jumped, still pocketed the 3. So that's a bad hit, ball in hand. And now my opponent's got an open table. You just pick a line on the 4 that allows you to drift over for the 5. The 6 is hanging in the side, but it's not really makeable from down here. So you'd have to try to get up table to play the 6 in the side, which can work out from here. He's got a line on the 5. With low right spin, you can get above the 6. And he hit it with the right spin, but missed the ball, and got fortunate with the cue ball bouncing back over, tapping into the 9, tapping into the 6, and the 6 managed to go into the side for him. Now we've got a long cut on the 5, natural shape for the 7 as long as you play it with enough pace. And that works out. Maybe could have gotten a bit more out of that, but again, pretty similar back cut on the 7 in the corner. Cue ball can come back around for the 8 as long as you give it enough pace. Let the cue out here. Which he does. Good speed. You don't need to be afraid to let your stroke out a bit on that one. You could even get more out of it, right? The straighter you are on this, the easier it is to shape the 9. And from here, you pocket this 8, and you're all but guaranteed shape on the 9. If you want to get cute, which he tried for, you go low left to spin back around to the center of the table. And a nice, easy line on the 9 in the side. Gives my opponent a game of 9-ball. All right, scorecard's up. He got that game of 9-ball. So a dry break and no look at the 1. So I addressed the table here, and you have to consider your options for a push out. Playing to your opponent, you know what they're capable of doing. Do they have a good jump shot in their repertoire? Are they good at kicks? So I start to consider leaving a kick, so pushing out to a kick, or a very thin touch on the 1-ball. From my perspective, down there on the left side of the 1-ball, we have to see where I end up after the push. Sometimes I'll use a ball like that, the 7-ball in this case, to kind of slow things down. If I push over to the back side, opponent comes to the table. He takes a look and doesn't like it. So he says, you can have this one. Or no, maybe he was just confirming with me that it was a push-up. and gives it back. Doesn't want to shoot it. So I look at the thin cut on the 1, and there is an edge to the 1, and you could send the 1 over onto the 6, and then the cue ball comes back around table and back down. I didn't end up liking that thin cut because it'd have to be bridging over the 7, and the corner pocket does come into play. You don't want to scratch there. So I decide my chances are better going with a kick shot with a chance to make the 1. Oh, and didn't miss it by much, but came up just above the 1, so a bad hit. And my opponent's decision to give back the push paid off. You get ball in hand out of that. Nice little treat. So relatively open table here. You got to pick your pattern. Make sure you get on the proper side of the ball, leave yourself an angle, all that good stuff. There's our focus. Thank you. Back above the 2, which works out. Now we can decide if we want to get on this side of the 3, which plays into the 8. Nope, sorry, the 4 ball. Or if we want to get short side on the 3. I rather like short side. He kind of punched that one like a bit of a stop shot with some draw. And we're in a tough position now. So severe cut on the 3 to the top left corner, which can get shape on the 4. So you focus on making this ball. Nice cut. That one goes in. See how we end up behind the 7. We end up behind the 7. The long rail kick could work out here. If we decide to go short rail, you come in above the 9. Makes a good hit. And now I'm pretty close to the 4 ball here. Unfortunately, with the blur, we can't tell exactly how close. But I am all but on top of this 4 ball. Close enough to cue at it and play a safe. And the hope was to, yep, exactly right, to play the 4 onto the 6. And I was feeling good enough to try to play both such that the cue ball would be left behind the 9. Cue leaked out just a little bit, but I had coverage here from the 8 ball, and the 4 is in a tough position up table. So it worked out pretty well. This might be a 2-rail Z shot kind of situation. Tried it, hit it, and almost made it. Those are exciting. They're easier to judge than you would think. It'd be worth practicing if you want to get on a table and try that shot. Set up a couple hangers, right? Put a ball in the jaws of the pocket in the corner, and just try for a 2-rail. You'd be surprised how quick you can train your intuition to sort of sight out the proper angles for those. One rail kick here to the 4 ball. You can go 1 rail like this, or you can go 2 rails. The 2-rail cut on the 4 ball is pretty thin, so I like the 1 rail better, especially because if you kick it 1 rail properly, the cut on the 4 sends you back down towards the 5. Got a back cut on the 4, and plays that well. Nearly scratches, and is down below the 5. 5's close to, if not frozen to the rail. So long shot up the rail for the 5. We'll have you drift out over for the 6 if we make it. Shoots it into the rail, unfortunately, so it does not go. And I think there he might be commenting on the alignment of the rail. He might be saying that the point was off. And I'm not sure if it came into play as much on his shot as it did with mine, but that might truly be what's going on here, is that the rails are misaligned on this table. especially hard to tell with the, here we go, the blur. No reason for that blur to come up here. At any rate, I make a shot on the 5, put that down, and we just have to get good shape on the 7. So I opt for a bit of cheating the pocket, playing the 6 over into the left-hand side of the pocket from my perspective, shooting. So here, and cue ball drifts down table with draw, get below the 7, and then you can decide if you want to draw straight back for the 8 in the corner, or if you want to roll through and get above the 8 to play the 8 in the side. And I liked going below it in this case, but I let up on my stroke a little bit and did not get enough out of it. So you really need to come back around so that you are here below it, or really let it out so that you get back above it. Both of those are very playable off a shot in the side pocket. Cue ball maintains a lot of its momentum coming off that ball, but don't be afraid to overplay it. You have to give it enough energy to continue through. Now I'm left with a tough decision here. Do I cut the 8 in this corner and try to hold the cue ball to come back over for the 9? Or do I play the 8 in this corner where the cue ball is going to want to go into this rail and bounce back out? Both are difficult to control, and the cut angle can be difficult to judge as well. And I also shoot a ball into a rail, and I get a little trick shot out of it. A little fancy 2-rail bank, and I wave my hand and I apologize. I verbally apologize to my opponent, like, sorry about that. And he was like, hey, you're allowed to get a roll. I've been getting rolls all game. Like, you can have one. And it does happen, as we all know. There is weird stuff and luck and rolls involved in this game. Just a part of it, especially 9-ball. And as part of my roll, I got nice shape on the 9. So that puts me on the hill. Some of the matches I did have to cut for time, or just because the blur was so bad that you couldn't make out what was happening. You'll see the score jumping around just a little bit here. And I'm trying to decide, you guys can let me know what you like better, more highlights style with commentary, or if you would really like to see full form of the match once the blur is fixed. I'd be happy to post the full match. But I'm working on editing and cutting down some of the thinking time at the table or interruptions and stuff like that. Just don't need any kind of dead air videos. So here I opt for a jump shot and miss the 1 ball, and it jumps over the 1 into the 9 ball and pockets the 9 ball. So I do like a little yay, I won the game. He's got ball in hand here, and the 4 ball dresses up pretty nicely for a combination on the 8. So we've got basically connect the dots, 1 stop shot, 2 stop shot, 4 into the 8, 4 stays here in the pocket, 4 goes there. Really the tricky part is going to be shaping from the 4 to the 5. See how he deals with that. Punched out a bit too far off the 2 ball. So now we've got the carom, which is the cue ball coming off a ball into the 8. You could still play the combo, but it's a thin cut on the 4. He plays the carom, a very nicely played carom, because it leaves the 4 ball in a good position to bring the cue ball back down table for the 5. It's a nice shot. Now you need a bit of draw to slide this one down the rail. You could use a high ball and try to Z-shot again. I think that's player preference, though. Both can work out. He goes for a bit more of a punchy stroke and gets tied up on the 5. Yeah, the lines were looking pretty good, but it opened up a little bit too much off that second rail, drove into the 5. So maybe looking at a kick shot here, one rail kick into the backside of the 5. And kicks at it, makes good contact, but the cut angle was off, and the 5 does not cooperate and drop for him. So now I'm left in a position here where I have a back cut on the 5. It sends the cue ball pretty much right into the 9 ball. You could play safe here. You could play straighter into the 5, leave the cue ball on the 9, sending the 5 up table towards the 6. I think that plays perfectly fine. Getting ball in hand is a big deal in this game, so you want that kind of powerful position whenever you can get it. I'm powering up like I'm going to try to cut this in and get shape. I tried to play for the bank. I tried to play the cross-side bank. The angle was there for that, and the shape on the 6 works out if you make it. And I happen to miss and leave the 5 by the first diamond here. This is a very cuttable shot, and the cue ball is either going to want to dive in this way or float back out, depending on the action you put on it. I think he tried to float it back out and get a bit more from the position. The 6 gets kicked down and is now frozen on the 9 ball, one pocket style. And I've got a reasonable shot on the 5. The thinking here is you pocket the 5, send the cue ball into this rail, and straight down into that cluster to break them up. You could play that with a touch of inside and a high ball. You could play that with outside and spin around and try to get the cut or the breakout this way. You have to decide how you're feeling, what feels better for you. I decide to play with inside, and I do not get the hit on the way down. I get a little bump on the way back up, and now all 3 of them are frozen. And that's what I'm laughing about, is just the improbability of it all. What a silly game we play. So now I'm frozen on the underside of the 6. Couple options here, having thought about it and looking back on it. You can kind of come thin off the low side of the 6 and try to leave your opponent down here. There's a chance you dress up a line on the 6 or even a 6-9 combination. You can come thin off the top side of the 6. However, the tangent line, what I'm looking at here, it does threaten the side pocket. So you have to, I had to play into this point. You have to be careful about the scratch there. You don't want to be giving up ball in hand with 2 balls left on the table here. So to me, this was the best I could do without taking half an hour to think about it. Nobody needs that. I sent him up table, put a bit of distance, left him a bit of a tester here, a bit of a tough cut on the 6. The 6 does go in this corner, and if you make that ball, the shape is pretty natural to come back up above the 9 ball. Let's see if he can clutch up. He does. Nice cut. And there's that natural shape. Brings you right above the 9. And that could have been game, guys. I could have gotten that breakout and finished this out, but instead, my opponent gets up to 4 games. We're on this last game here. Break and a scratch. 1 ball's hanging over the corner pocket. 2 balls down in a bit of traffic, but with ball in hand, let's see if we can manage this run out. I have to think about, where do I want to be on the 2 such that I can easily get down on the 3. Getting up into center of the table works, because then you can play the 2 and follow down for the 3. You don't want to be on this side of the 2, because then you have to worry about holding the cue ball too much. If I decide to exaggerate that a little bit, go for the farther side of this position window, which is completely fine. I still have my line on the 2, and you can either underplay this very softly, leave the cue ball over here on the rail for a shot on the 3, or you can push it in with a bit more authority and the cue ball comes back over for the 3. And I decide to use that other long rail, punching it in there and coming back over for the 3. Pretty natural shape on the 4 here. The cue ball wants to, after you cut the 3, the cue ball wants to dive into this rail and come back up. You just control your speed so that you don't get too much of a back cut on the 4. You don't want to be up in this area. This was good. Maybe a touch of outside there, a touch of right-hand spin to control the angle and get a straighter shot on the 4. Checking my line on the 4, what's going to be best for getting back up on the 6. I know that floating down just a little bit gives you more of a cut on the 5, sends the cue ball back up table for the 6. Now we're playing some pool. Good line on the 5, clean shot on the 4. And this time, you don't need to come back around and look at the 6. You know where it is. You know what you need to do. This is the one that you want to look at. Coming off the 6, you've got your cut angle. You know the cue ball is going to want to dive into the rail again and come into this long rail. Where do you want to be on the 7 so that you have a shot on the 8? This is speed control and making sure to not threaten that side pocket. Use just a touch of outside to straighten out that line off the short rail. I did fall slightly short here. The 7 is still very playable, but now the natural angle wants to bring me into the 9. So I'm going to have to use draw to spin up and away. And I got above the 9, but I dragged down into the 8. This was a bit of a roll. This was a bit of a lucky roll where the 8 dressed up over the pocket in a playable position. Low outside, you slide around the 8 ball, natural shape on the 9. And that's game. Hope you guys enjoyed. Longer commentary here today, but yeah, really enjoying this stuff and love having the discussion with you guys. Like I said, thanks for sticking around. If you made it all the way to the end, it's wonderful. You're in the right place. If you made it to the end of this video, this is where you belong. So love having you all. Looking forward to the discussions in the comments. We've got a lot more content coming your way, a lot more matches and tournaments coming up the next few weeks. I'll be recording as much as I can. There's going to be plenty of shorts and drill down videos and drill videos separate from that. So hope you all are enjoying. Let me know what you would like to see if you have questions or anything down there. And again, remember to subscribe and like videos. It helps out a lot. Thanks, guys.